Hello and welcome to a complete beginner's guide to Final Fantasy XIV Online. And my name is JCN, I am the editor-in-chief of Virtua, and I am going to, in a series of relatively short videos, I hope, give you the rundown on the fundamentals of how to approach to play this. I'm going to assume that you've never played Final Fantasy XIV Online before, also going to assume that you have never played a MMO before, a massive multiplayer online, and whether or not you have played fantasy role-playing games before, such as Dragon Age or Mass Effect. There are fundamental differences between the mechanics and the way that you approach playing those solo experience games and massive multiplayer online games, and I'll be pointing those out. So, right from the start, you're going to be creating a character selection screen. Now, you have very many options. The first things that you will want to select, or have the choice of selecting, are the race and the gender of your character. To what extent those choices actually affect the way that you will be playing the game, minimal at the most. So don't worry about that. Choose a race that you like the look of, a gender that you want to play. There are no restrictions. For instance, I have a female avatar here because she's very pretty, but I mean, you could be a female gamer and wish to explore playing a male character, or whatever choice. It really doesn't make any difference to the actual gameplay and what you achieve in the game. It's just aesthetics. So, once you've done that, you will then be asked to select what's called a class. Now, this is very important. For complete beginners, which I'm assuming you are, you do not want to pick a class that will fall into two of three very broad categories that are staples of MMOs and do not appear in single role-playing games. Now, these sets of classes, if you like, these separate divisions of classes, are known as tanks, healers, and DPS. You'll hear those names an awful lot. So what are they? Well, the tanks are character classes that are very strong and take a lot of damage. Their role is to attract all of the creatures in a group encounter and keep them in a group in front of them or around them. And the purpose of that is they can take an awful lot of damage, whereas other character classes can't. So that's the tank's role. The healer's role is self-explanatory. They do other things, but principally healers keep everybody alive, healing. And then the third class, DPS, which stands for damage per second, are the classes that damage the monsters while the tanks hold their attention. So the tanks hold them all together, do a bit of damage themselves, but it's up to the DPS to really lay into them without getting hurt by the monsters, because the monsters put all of the damage on the tank. And the healers keep everybody alive. Well, those are the basics of group encounters, which form an important part, but not the total part by any means, of a MMO experience. Final Fantasy XIV is great because an awful lot of it is solo experience. You will feel like you're in a solo role-playing game as the hero of the story, but there'll be plenty of opportunities to mix with others and do group events, and you'll find out about that on your experience, your adventure. So, for a beginner, I would suggest these two classes. The first is the Archer, and the second is the Lancer. Both of those start in one of three of capital cities in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, of the starting areas for new characters. There is Ul'dah, there is Gridania, where the Lancer and the Archers start, and there is Limonza. Now, you might want to choose a different class, fine, and the reason that I suggested those two classes because they are DPS classes. Now, it's quite possibly you want to choose a different class and it may be principally a healer or a tank. And you might get on with the mechanics of that as you progress through the game and be quite happy with that. But if you find yourself, you've chosen a class and you're not really happy with it, don't fear, because when you level up, and that's another aspect of MMOs and role-playing games, you gain experience and you get different levels. You start at 1 and progress. When you get to level 15, you'll be able to choose a different class. In Final Fantasy XIV, you can be as many classes as you want, and it's easy to change over. All you do is you change your weapon or whatever you're holding, and it changes the class. You'll discover that as you go on. An awful lot of it is explained extremely well on your progression through the adventure, so I don't have to dive into that too much anymore. So once you've chosen your class, your race, you can then tweak your avatar with the full customization that's available, very powerful customization tools, and then you will be asked to name your character. I suggest choosing a good name, a good fantasy name that suits your character and what you're trying to portray in the game world. I see an awful lot of silly names. Some of them kind of work, some of them don't. It's up to you. If you're not bothered, or you have to remember that the name is going to represent what you're bringing to the game, how you're approaching the game, how you want to approach others as well. So the name can indicate whether or not it's true, an aspect of what you're like. So choosing a really stupid name might be detrimental to you, because other players who take the gaming a little bit more serious might not have so much more time to play around with and just want to get things done. If you have a silly name, they're going to be less likely to want to play with you. Just be warned. You can change your name later on, but it's going to cost you real money, and it costs about £9, which is what, $16 or $17. So think about your name carefully, and once you've done that, you'll be launched into the game on one of the starting cities that I've mentioned. At the beginning, you'll be asked what kind of controller input you want, either a game controller for the Xbox One or the PS4, or keyboard and mouse for the PC. Now, I'm going to be discussing the controller for the PS4 because I run the game on the PS4. If you're a PC owner, you will probably want to research key binding and how to do that. You'll find plenty of information on the net, I'm sure, about that. Xbox One users, the similarities will be very close, so if they're not exactly the same, I'm sure that it'll be quite easy to figure out with your controller configuration. I don't think there are major discrepancies between the two. So having said all of that, once you've done that, we're assuming now that you've chosen controller, you're on a platform rather than a PC, both computer systems. The very next thing you'll want to do is to sort out the HUD, the heads-up display. Now, you can see that I haven't got a heads-up display on my screen at the moment. What on earth's going on? And it gives you this opportunity just to show you off how beautiful this game is. If I do a nice pan shot, this relatively nice rotation speed, look at that. This is just one area in this vast world, one of the new areas from the Stormblood expansion. 2 expansions for Fantasy XIV so far, Heaven's Sword and Stormblood. This is from Stormblood. So you can see that aesthetically Final Fantasy XIV is absolutely gorgeous.